Now we're going to be reading about the War of 1812, where this is the war fought when James Madison was president. So, War of 1812, this is kind of known as our second war for independence. And it was fought from June 18th, 1812, hence the War of 1812, anyone? And February 1815. For the Americans, the greatest annoyance was the British practice of impressments. Now, in other words, what is an impressment? The capture of American sailors for service in the British Navy. The British government claimed that it was only detaining subjects of the crown who sailed under the American flag to escape wartime service in their own navy. However, in fact, the British seized not only their own deserters, but also around 6,000 regular American citizens. Whoop, hey, you're going to go be in the British Navy. Britain did not really want a war with the United States because it was already at war with France. And trying to avoid a war, Britain announced that they would no longer interfere with American shipping. However, the slow mails of the day just took time to communicate back in those days. The slow mails of the day prevented this news from reaching the United States till weeks after June 18th. June 18th is when Congress approved a declaration of war. They backed off. They're not going to fight and take our dudes anymore. But we already declared war, so let's fight this out. In spite of its small size, the U.S. Navy did rise to the challenge. Its warships were the fastest afloat at the time. American naval officers had valuable experience fighting pirates in the First Barbary War. Arr. Early in the war, before the British blockaded the coast, the USS Constitution and the USS United States won stirring victories. Seriously, if you have a chance to go get on that Google machine and look up the USS Constitution, awesome. Awesome stuff. After defeating France in April 1814, Great Britain turned its full attention to the United States. British forces focused their attacks on Washington, D.C., and they burned the Capitol building and the White House in August. They burned down the White House. They took our White House and they made it on fire. They burned our White House number 2 is what we have today, because White House number 1 was burned. They burned it. The first White House is dead. It's gone bye-bye. White House number 2 today. All right, I'm done being goofy. All right, here we go. The British then attacked Fort McHenry in Baltimore. The commander had requested a flag so large that the British will have no difficulty in seeing it. Tagged on a British ship, a lawyer named Francis Scott Key watched the all-night battle. And at dawn, Francis Scott Key saw the flag still flying. He then wrote the eventual U.S. national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. Because our flag was still there. It actually was a real battle. And the next day, that huge flag was still there. In the South, the British moved against the strategic port of New Orleans. The British attacked General Andrew Jackson. Oh, you're going to hear his name again. His forces on January 8, 1815. Protected by earthworks, they just piled up dirt to make 2 walls. The American riflemen mowed down the advancing redcoats. It was a great victory for Andrew Jackson. American casualties totaled 71 compared to the British 2,000. The Battle of New Orleans made Jackson a hero. It was technically unnecessary. Slow mails from Europe, here we go with slow communication again, had delayed news of the Treaty of Ghent, which ended the War of 1812. It had been signed 2 weeks earlier on December 24th, 1814. The treaty of Ghent, showed that the war had no real clear winner. Technically, nobody really won this war. No territory changed hand, and trade disputes were still left unresolved. So the reason we fought this war was because, and in the end, the winner was. Still, the war did have important consequences. First, the heroic exploits of men such as Andrew Jackson and Oliver Perry, sailing ships, increased American patriotism. Second, the war broke the strength of the American Native Americans, who had sided with the British. Finally, when war interrupted trade, the Americans were forced to make many of the goods they had previously imported, and this encouraged the growth of U.S. manufacturers. The U.S. also proved that it could defend itself against the military power of the era, the strongest country at the time. For perhaps the first time, Americans believed that the young nation actually might survive and prosper. Hope you're learning, and I hope you're doing well. See